Welcome back to Beyond the Bracket, a special edition series of a SportsBeat KC podcast that's here to cover everything March Madness, presented by the First Federal Bank of Kansas City. I'm Lila Bromberg, and each week I'm bringing on reporters and columnists from around the country to discuss college hoops. We've made it all the way to the Final Four, and there are plenty of storylines to get into, and we have two insiders into two of the Final Four teams on today's episode. I'm joined by Jesse Newell, who covers the Kansas Jayhawks for the Kansas City Star, and Steve Wiseman, who covers the Duke Blue Devils for the News and Observer. I know this is such a busy time for you both. You guys have had some hectic travel, so thanks so much for coming on.
Glad to be with you guys. It's a joy to be on.
Yeah. This is a busy time of year, but fun time of year. So, let's get to it.
So we have a very blue blood Final Four coming up in New Orleans. Of course, as we mentioned, Duke and Kansas on opposite sides of that bracket. The Jayhawks will face Villanova in the first game on Saturday, followed by quite the historic matchup between Duke and North Carolina, which is the first ever meeting for those two rivals in the NCAA tournament. And we'll get into previewing all of that. But first, I want to get some updates from you both on the programs you cover in the tournament so far. So, Steve, let's start with Duke here. The Blue Devils lost to North Carolina in Coach K's last game at Cameron Indoor to end the regular season. They then lost to Virginia Tech in the ACC tournament final. And it really seemed like all that pressure of this last shot for Coach K, all the buzz around that was starting to get to them. What do you think has changed since then, especially for this being such a young group?
Yeah, it really was. The pressure was too much for them, particularly that Carolina game, the build up to that. And the coaches all said they tried to prepare the kids for it as best they could, but afterwards they just realized that it just proved too much. You don't know what you don't know until you go through it. And maybe they would have planned things differently, who knows, but it just didn't work out. And then there was still kind of the hangover of effect that you mentioned. They won 2 games in Brooklyn, beat Syracuse and Miami to reach the championship game. And they really wanted to get, that championship banner for Coach K. And they just fell apart in the second half against Virginia Tech and didn't have the defense they needed to win that game. So after that, they had 3 hard days of practice in Durham before they went to Greenville for the South Carolina for the NCAA tournament. There were a lot of soul searching conversations, player only meetings, all the stuff that you would expect of the last shot. This was really the finality of it. The next loss was going to be Coach K's last, and also this team's last chance to play together because most of them are going to the NBA after this year. So they really made a commitment to defense. They've played a lot better defense, and they closed out, a couple of games in the tournament that I don't think they would have closed out in the regular season. The win over Michigan State in the second round and the win over Texas Tech in the third round. So they're really playing at their highest level at the right time. It's kind of like guys in spring training saying they're in the best shape of their lives, but this is what they want. They're proving it on the court. They're looking better than they have all year.
And you mentioned before we started recording the kind of use of the zone defense for Duke in the second half, which is not something that they would traditionally do in the role that's played throughout the tournament. Could you tell us a bit about that and just how big that's been for this team?
Yeah. Coach K always is a staunch believer in man-to-man defense from the Bobby Knight School of Defensive Coaching. And that's been one of Duke's staples, the whole slap the floor man-to-man defense approach. But over the last few years, he's mixed in more zone than ever. And part of that comes from when he was in USA basketball coaching with Jim Boeheim, who obviously plays the 2-3 at Syracuse extensively. And Coach K came around to use having the zone there kind of in the toolbox. Man-to-man is their base defense. If you look at Synergy, they played man-to-man 95, 96% of the time. But in the second half of the last few games here in the NCAA tournament, when they've had trouble with teams driving to the basket, beating guys off the dribble and getting the big center, Mark Williams, kind of out of position inside, the zone has made a huge difference. They've put that in, kind of surprised teams with it, and it's really halted those defensive breakdowns that Duke had, even if it's just for a short period, even if it's just for 5 minutes of the second half, it kind of settles things down and then gets Duke's offense going. And that's how they won the game, particularly against Texas Tech in the Sweet 16. That was a big part of things. And then against Arkansas, Arkansas got within 5 points in the second half after being down double digits most of the game. And Duke called a timeout, put the zone in. Duke went on a 10-0 run. They got a couple of block shots at the rim by Williams, and off they went. So you wouldn't think in Coach K's last year that the zone would save his team and get him to the Final Four, but after 42 years, that's where we are.
And Jesse, for you on the other side of this bracket, when the bracket came out, I mean, a lot of people were talking about Kansas having, kind of one of the easier paths to the Final Four. They're the last one seed left standing, knocking off Texas Southern, Creighton, Providence, and most recently Miami to get there, holding all those teams, on average to less than 60 points a game. What has, stuck out to you the most about the run that Kansas has been on?
Yeah, and real quick, Steve, that zone defense is something KU's familiar with, because in the 2018 Elite Eight, KU was able to find a few openings in the corners against it when Duke was playing their super huge lineup too. But Duke was leading in that game by 3 late too, so they had a chance to win before Svi had a little bit of magic and Devontae had a little magic to put that in overtime. And obviously Grayson Allen's shot rimmed out there at the end of regulation. But for Kansas, I mean, raise hand here talking about the easy bracket. That's kind of what I thought going in for Kansas. Usually I'm the one standing there saying, hey, these teams that are lined up in front of them are pretty tough. And it seems like KU's road was difficult. And that's something obviously I said last year when they had not only USC, but Gonzaga potentially waiting for them if they continue to advance. But not only did KU get a nice draw, then they had teams in front of them that were their biggest competition fall out. Iowa dropped out in that first round. Auburn was a team that didn't make it. And I think what it just does for Kansas is we talk about what to expect from Coach K this time of year. What you can expect from Kansas usually is playing tight in the NCAA tournament. I mean, it just feels like they aren't really even playing basketball the first few games. They're just so worked up and they're so nervous, and they know that the weight of the world is on their shoulders. But, against Creighton, especially, and, against Providence, you can play that way. And yet if you're an 11.5 point favorite or a 7.5 point favorite, you just have some wiggle room. You have some opportunity to not play that well, and you're not playing a team like a Gonzaga or a Kentucky or a Duke that really can deliver that knockout blow when you're not playing well. So I think for Kansas, what it did was it allowed them to kind of play through those nerves. And even a team like Miami, I mean, when you go have a game in the Elite Eight, you're not expecting to be a 6 point favorite in that game. So KU was down by 6 against Miami after not playing well in the first half, but when you're playing Miami, you can come back. When you're playing Gonzaga, you can't. You know what I'm saying? So I think it just allowed Kansas enough time to kind of find itself. And then obviously that second half against Miami, it finally came off. The lid came off for them. They started to play loose. They started to play free. You could see guys just start to relax. And when it came through in a big way. And so that's where Kansas is. You're not going to apologize for your draw. KU will not apologize for it. They won't take down the banner because of that. But I think they definitely were helped along the way by getting this particular path and having some teams in front of them fall before the Jayhawks could get to them.
Yeah, I mean, that looseness seems like a thing for both. Oh, sorry, you're going to go ahead, Steve?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, hey, there's no apologizing for bracket luck. That's how you get through this tournament. It happens, right? No, I mean, North Carolina's in it because they created their own bracket luck by knocking off Baylor. But then, St. Peter's took care of Kentucky and Purdue, who had pounded Carolina during the year. So that happens. Duke got a little bit of it when Gonzaga got knocked off by Arkansas. And Duke had beaten Gonzaga earlier in the year. But I'm not sure that matchup would have been good for Duke the second time, because this Duke team has when they've beaten somebody, kind of watching the next meeting, kind of like, we got this. We already took care of them. It happened against Carolina, happened against Virginia Tech. But if they lose to somebody, it's a different attitude. So, yeah. No apologizing for bracket luck. That's March.
Well, and that's the thing about the tournament, Steve, and you could probably speak to this for Duke, and this might be kind of a topic of conversation for us here, is the perception of this Kansas team all year, and I don't think it's wrong, is that this is not one of Bill Self's best teams. It's just not. I mean, if you want to compare this to other Kansas teams, it hasn't been dominant start to finish. It hasn't had a bunch of NBA players. It hasn't been the team where you go, oh my God, this team is destined to make a run. I mean, as recent as 3 weeks ago, I was trying to talk KU fans out of, hey, this team is absolutely going to lose in the first weekend, that sort of thing. But you talk about the bracket and how it falls to you. Just like you can't make excuses when you have a tough one and can't make it out, you also don't apologize when it opens up for you. So again, right. I could rattle off here. I could say, hey, look, 2017 KU was better, and 2016 KU was better, and 2010 KU was better, and 2011 KU was better than this year's team. Those teams didn't make the Final Four. It could have been, hey, you ran into a tough Villanova team, you had bad luck, whatever the case may be, you ran into a hot shooting team. But the bottom line is, they don't – I wrote this in the story earlier a couple of weeks ago. I said, they don't strike the schedule Final Four banners. They don't go back and look at that. I mean, that's not part of the banner. It's like, oh, here's the teams you face. No, it says Final Four. And so when that road opens up in front of you, you take advantage. And that's what Kansas did. I mean, they had that road. You don't apologize for it. You can't change it, but they took advantage. And again, were able to play through some of those nerves that they had early on, able to get those 4 victories. So a credit to them for doing that.
I mean, but even with kind of that path opening up, I mean, I was going to ask you about that. This isn't the most talented Kansas team, but has been able to get this far. I mean, what is it that you think makes this group special that has allowed them to, regardless of bracket or whatever, to get to this point? And like, what is it that makes them click with not necessarily having that same level of talent?
Well, and that's probably a really good question for Steve too, for Duke, but for Kansas, I think, so it's funny. I mean, I talk about how March 1st, Kansas lost at TCU and the sky was falling. This team is going to lose in the second round. They're like every other Bill Self team, all that stuff. But it's interesting because nobody wants to lose, but sometimes that really can refocus a team. And I've talked to multiple guys who said that in the locker room, Ochai Agbaji is usually kind of a stoic guy, pretty even keeled. And that was KU's second straight loss. They just lost at Baylor too. And now they had to win both of their remaining games to have a share of the Big 12 title. And I guess he stood up in there and said, my senior year is not going out this way. That's it. That's enough. That sort of thing. And guys, I mean, obviously he's the leader on the team, but for him to speak up in that moment, guys started paying more attention to the scouting report. Guys started to lock in defensively. And you've heard this Bill Self mantra, and he loves talking about this. He loves winning games when Kansas doesn't play well. Like he wants to make the other team play worse, even if you're not playing well. And this team's really bought into it. I mean, we talk about what they've done recently. Kansas, before or after that TCU game, they were hanging around in the back end of the 40s in adjusted defensive efficiency at KenPom. Right now, they're 17th. I mean, you go from 48 to 17 in 3 weeks' time. That means you're doing something right defensively. So KU their switches have been better. Their communication's been better. They've had guys like Remy Martin, who's gotten his burst back and has tried a lot harder on the defensive end, has taken more pride in that, which is something Bill Self has tried to demand from the beginning of the season. So there's a lot of credit to go around, but I think mostly it's just a mindset that happened after that TCU game that the guys kind of looked at each other and said, hey, enough's enough. This thing needs to change. It needs to turn around. And it started with Ochai Agbaji in the locker room, standing up and saying something he wouldn't have said his previous 3 years at Kansas. And I think that really got Kansas going.
And Duke is a younger team. I mean, a lot of guys it's a very freshman-led team or kind of younger guys. I mean, who is that guy in the locker room for them, Steve?
Yeah, they don't have any senior starters who are going to stand up and say anything because they don't have any senior starters. So, but
makes it tough.
Yes, Wendell Moore is a junior. He's a team captain. He played. This is his third year, and weirdly, pandemic, all that. This is the first time he ever played in the NCAA tournament at Duke. That's obviously never happened in Coach K's time, but it happened this time because of all that happened. But so Wendell became the guy that he's the one talking. He told me that in these player meetings they had throughout the year, but more so later in the year, that it used to be he would do a lot of talking, and his co-captain is senior Joey Baker, who's a deep reserve. He doesn't play very much, but those two would talk. But now, as it got later in the year, other people stood up and said things that needed to be said, and they learned that, like especially like Paulo Banchero, who is obviously the most talented player on the team. He's going to be a top 5 NBA pick. He didn't have the drive sometimes he needed. And it was more, he was almost too unselfish, like with the ball. Like he could beat people off the dribble and score like an NBA guy should in college basketball. Right. And sometimes he'd do that and pass off to somebody or not take the shot or turn it over because he wasn't being strong enough with it. And there was talk to him. He said, some things about he needs to take charge of things and be less, be more unselfish, be more selfish, I guess, instead of unselfish. That's been a big difference for Duke, and also their back to the defense, their connectedness on defense. They're a team that switches all over the court. They didn't do that against Arkansas, but they did it almost the rest of the time. That's how they play defense, and that involves a lot of communication on the court, a lot of talking. Mark Williams, the big center in the middle, is a sophomore. He's not a big talker. That's just not. He doesn't come across that way. Moore has to do it. They want to get Williams. He's in the back of the defense, so he has to do a lot of calling of screens and things like that. It's happened more now as this tournament has unfolded because, again, they saw the finality of what was going to happen if they didn't get this straightened out. They were going to send Coach K off on as bad as the UNC loss was in Cameron in his last home game, had they lost to Michigan State, not gotten out of Greenville again, that would have been an even worse finish.
Yeah, it certainly seems like both. I mean, for both the teams you guys covered, both have kind of improved in different ways defensively. And you mentioned Paolo, I mean, averaging through 4 games of a tournament, 18.5 points, 7 rebounds, nearly 4 assists. So certainly looking the part of a lottery pick right now.
Yeah, he's got, and he's only like a 31% 3-point shooter for the season, but his 3-point shooting, he's hit some big threes in the tournament, and he's taken them with confidence instead of maybe being tentative or looking to pass off. It's like, take it. You can make this shot, and he'll be a better 3-point shooter when he gets in the NBA. But they want him to go ahead and start doing it now and take those shots, and it's really worked out. He's helping out rebounding too. You mentioned the rebounding stats in the tournament. One of the things that was hurting them a lot was giving up offensive rebounds for baskets, and Mark Williams, led the ACC in block shots. He's the all ACC Defensive Player of the Year. Sometimes he was, attempting the block and then leaving the basket open and not getting back for the rebound if the shot got off. And Paulo has done a better job of sliding back in there and backfilling that and getting that rebound so that Mark Williams can have the freedom to make that move, because Paulo is 6'10" and 250. So even though he has skills of a guard, he can get in there and bang inside too. And so that's an adjustment he's made. So yeah, he's really, a guy that can take over a game, and they really Duke needs him to do that if they're going to win it all this weekend.
And it seems like Remy's kind of emerged as a guy for Kansas as well, Jesse, as I remember when we were at the Big 12 tournament, that first game, he looked kind of uncomfortable, and then just kind of seemed like something switched for him later in that tournament, and has looked really good for the NCAA tournament. How big is that going to be for them moving forward?
Well, it gives them another weapon. I think Bill Self talked to this after this past game against Miami, but he kind of saved KU in those 2 games where they were playing really tight. And the Bill Self holdovers were the ones playing tight, the Christian Browns, the Ochai Abajis, the David McCormicks of the world. Let's call it like it is. For a while, they were scared to shoot. They were scared to make any plays. And then Remy came in and just started turning around, shooting fadeaways and, off the dribble jumpers and making them. And KU was getting offense when they were running bad offense, but sometimes you just kind of need to keep the boat afloat. And that's what Remy did in those games. But Bill Self talked about this team gained confidence when Remy was out, because they played without him and kind of shared the ball, played team basketball, scored really well. They were great in transition. So that was a really good development for them as they basically won the Big 12 title, or shared it with Baylor without him. But then when he emerged in that Big 12 tournament and they saw what he could do when he was totally healthy, it just gave them a different level, and also a different level of confidence and emotion and energy, because that's what he brings. He's a dude that plays with flair, and he's pumping up the crowd. He's trying to get guys going. And so, I think Kansas had a really good season even when he wasn't in there, but this gives them a different dynamic when he is in there. And then not only that, Bill Self is kind of one of those master tacticians when you get in these games, because Remy didn't play much against Miami. He was the most outstanding player of the regional, but he didn't play much in that game because, Bill Self saw the matchup. They were doing well defensively. They gave up 15 points in the second half to Miami. So really no reason to put a guy out there who's one of your weaker defenders when other 5 guys are playing well and switching well and doing all those things you need them to do. So it makes Kansas dangerous, because now one of the most dynamic lineups is playing those 2-point guards together, DeJuan Harris and Remy Martin, and those guys flying up and down the court, getting after teams defensively. But if that's not working, you can take one of those guys out, shift him to point guard, and you put, Jalen Wilson in, and all of a sudden, you've got kind of a different sort of lineup that can score in the way that KU scored most of the season when Remy was out. So it gives Bill Self options, but it also keeps the rotation pretty tight, which I mentioned this online, but look at all these teams. This is kind of what the Final Four has become. Most teams that make the Final Four are teams that do not have a very deep bench. You get a tight rotation, you get used to your guys, you get a nice routine going, and then these long media timeouts, long half times help you in the NCAA tournament. And so Bill Self has kind of a really nice 7-8 man rotation right now. He doesn't kind of have to look outside that. So that's kind of what Remy has provided.
And Coach K is doing the same thing, just to jump in there on that very topic. These veteran coaches who've been in the tournaments know you can play 6 or 7 guys. I mean, Duke's really playing like 6.5 because Theo John is the backup center to Mark Williams, and he only played 10 minutes or 8 minutes in the last couple of games. So Duke really has 6 guys, Trevor Keels being the reserve that they're going with. And I mentioned Joey Baker, the senior, earlier. He would get some minutes in the regular season. He would play some in the first half. He's a decent little 3-point shooter. He's a real liability on defense, but his minutes have disappeared in the NCAA tournament because, again, they get the timeouts are 3 minutes longer than during the regular season, and the halftime's longer. So you get that kind of rest. And yeah, it's really down to a very tight rotation.
I should mention too, I think another really big deal is there are no home games technically in the NCAA tournament. Mm-hmm. And these officials want to do everything possible to not have their hands on the result. So if, again, like KU Creighton's a perfect example. I mean, Creighton goes in, they lose their big guy Kalkbrenner. They basically have 5 guys they can play, 6 if they're really desperate. And Creighton was not getting called for very many fouls. I mean, I know that was kind of what they did throughout the regular season, but I mean, the officials go into this sort of knowing, like, if they give 3 Creighton guys, 2 whistles right off the bat, then the whole story is going to be of the tournament or that tournament game is going to be the officials. So they want to do all they can, I think, in the back of their minds to not determine these outcomes. So you use that to your advantage, and you don't need more than about 6 or 7 guys in most games. And that's how these teams have gotten here to the Final Four.
We're going to take a quick word from our sponsors.
Make the big moments possible with First Federal Bank of Kansas City's March Rate Special. Earn 0.55 annual percentage yield when you open a new 11-month certificate of deposit. Already bank with us? Get started by depositing $25,000 in new funds. New to First Federal? Join us with a $1,000 deposit. Learn more at ffbkc.com/moments and meet our team at any banking center to open your account today. Visit ffbkc.com/moments for more. First Federal Bank of Kansas City, because banking is personal. Member FDIC.
And I think it's going to be very interesting with this Final Four, with these programs, to just see a different strategy that's deployed. You've got 3 Hall of Fame coaches, and then Hubert Davis getting into the Final Four in his first year, which we'll get into as well. But just looking at this Final Four lineup with, these teams that are considered blue bloods, I guess you can kind of debate whether you consider Villanova a blue blood, but, one in 2016 and 18, and won 2 of the last 5 national championships, because we're excluding 2020, of course. And so then, Duke won it 2015, North Carolina won it 2017, Kansas, all-time wins. I mean, just what do you both think of just having these level of coaches, these level of programs in this tournament?
Yeah, I think it's really a very historic event. Like, when you talk about the level of program here, it's we all attend the Champions Classic, right, Jesse? In the start of the year, this is a Champions Classic. This is a different combination of teams, but it's definitely a Champions Classic. With Carolina has 6, Duke has 5. The other 2 have 3 each, and they've all of them have won or been in the Final Four in the last 10, 12 years here, right? Kansas 2008 for the championship, but they've been knocking on the door here, Final Four regular. Over the last few years here. And I think Villanova, you have to include now in that list of blue bloods that they've made themselves. They're a modern, and Florida State likes to say they're a new blood because they won the ACC last year and all that. So, or a couple of years ago, and they've become better. Villanova's kind of a new blood, even though they won in 85. But 3 Hall of Fame coaches, and, Hubert Davis in his first year getting Carolina to the Final Four has stamped his name on this program that he's going to continue what's happened since Dean, Frank McGuire and Dean Smith and Roy Williams, and now Hubert stepped in and done it. And what a group we've got here. And I know everybody likes upsets in the tournament. We all love to see them happen. St. Peter's was one of the best stories we've had. But when it gets right down to it, we like to see our brand names in the Final Four, I think, and knocking heads. And I think the sport kind of needs this, frankly, coming out of the pandemic and everything. The ticket prices are through the roof for this event. The ratings are going to be great. I just think it's wonderful for college basketball.
Well, Steve, I'm going to blame you for the ticket prices, because this Coach K little retirement tour is bringing out all the Dukies to try to figure out which last game it's going to be for him. And now they're secure. Like, if I go buy tickets to these 2 games, one of those is his last game, and I will be there. So I think they are driving up the market in New Orleans, and I'm hoping to God that one of us finds a hotel room down there, because I'm a little concerned for all of us. We might be, laying on Bourbon Street at some point, snuggled up to try to make our way to the national title game.
You mean you haven't already done that? You haven't already laid on Bourbon Street? Oh, yeah, that's 32%.
See, Steve is a veteran here of many Final Fours and many Bourbon Streets. So maybe a little more experience in that regard than me. I did attend it, covering it for Kansas. That's the weird thing about Kansas. I think it's the last 4 Final Fours in New Orleans. Kansas has made it. So I think they're about to petition New Orleans to host all of them, like no more anywhere else, Minneapolis or all these other places, just New Orleans, just keep it there. I'm sure that's what Kansas people are thinking right now. I talked about the officiating earlier, and I'm not one about conspiracy theories and the NCAA president coming down and telling people what to do, but it was funny. We had this discussion in the media room at the United Center before the Elite Eight started. The Final Four could have been Arkansas, St. Peter's, Houston, and Miami. And what do you think CBS would have thought about that? I mean, again, Houston's got a great program. I mean, nothing against Kelvin Sampson, but again, you're talking about ratings, interest. Like, there still would have been the St. Peter's thing, but would people have gone to that event? Would it have felt like a Final Four? But the next words out of our mouth was, oh my gosh, look at this bracket. The Final Four could be Duke, North Carolina, Kansas, Villanova. And after all these upsets and after all the fun of the tournament and all the drama and everything that happened before this and teams going down, it has been a fun tournament. It's been an entertaining one. People have really enjoyed this one. I just agree with you, Steve. I know that both of us are going to cover it, and it's fun to cover Final Fours. And obviously the fan bases that we cover or around are very happy with how this thing has turned out. But there just is something about Duke, North Carolina in the Final Four, Kansas, Villanova in the Final Four. I mean, for all the upsets, for all the things that makes that exciting, what's really going to make the Final Four exciting is that it's not that. It's the best of the best showing up, and that's going to be must-watch television for anybody who really cares about the sport. So I think this is really cool. And I think Kansas also, Bill Self, he's got to be happy that some of these teams got knocked off, the Gonzagas of the world, the Houstons potentially, but this also is probably close to 2008. Remember when all the 1 seeds made it? And you want to talk about the blue blood Final Four. So Kansas made it now in 2022. Back in 2008, UCLA, North Carolina, and Memphis. Now, again, Memphis would be called a new blood, but John Calipari was there. So it wasn't like some bum coach off the sideline, a guy who you knew his trajectory was going up. So this should be great. I mean, yeah, buckle up. Let's get down there and let's play these games. It should be entertaining no matter which team wins or which direction it goes.
Right. And you look at North Carolina in there as, a team that was an 8 seed. I wasn't even sure that they were going to get out of the first weekend. I mean, you talked to me a couple months ago, I would have said you were crazy if you had North Carolina going to the Final Four. I mean, towards the end of January, this team was 12-6, had suffered blowout losses to Purdue, Tennessee, Kentucky, Miami, Wake Forest. I mean, and there are questions about Hubert Davis. And now he's the first-year coach, lead his team to a Final Four since Bill Guthridge, also at UNC in 98. Steve, you've seen this team play throughout the year, and, you're familiar with that program as, someone who covers Duke. Just what are your thoughts on this run for Carolina and the job Davis has done to even get to a point where we're talking about this blue blood Final Four?
Yeah, he stuck with his plan and didn't waver from it. And there were a lot of, whenever you're taking over for a legend, the guy that follows the guy thing, right? He was in a tough spot, and there were a lot of people saying a lot of things about his coaching style and all that when they were going through those struggles. And, you look at late February, they lost at home to Pittsburgh, one of the worst teams in the ACC. And, we all thought that may have doomed their bid. Like if they had to, at that point, they were going to have to win at Cameron to get into the tournament. And after losing by 20 at home to Duke, few people thought that was going to happen, especially the people at Duke that planned that big party. But anyway, that changed it. I mean, that they got their confidence going at that point, and it really hasn't stopped. I know they lost to Virginia Tech in the ACC tournament, but that's kind of been a blip on the radar here. They were the 8-9 game against Marquette, and they won that handily. They got for the 25-point lead against Baylor with 10 minutes to go, and Brady Manek fouls out, and game ends up in overtime with one starter ejected, one starter fouling out, and everybody, I know a lot of people that following Carolina thought they were done when it got to overtime. There's no way they could hang on and win that game, and then they gutted it out and got the win with guys making 3-pointers they hadn't played hardly all year. So it shows you the feelings, the camaraderie that team has, and the confidence they've gained through this process that they got here, and they're as good. They have as good a chance to win the sucker as anybody. They're playing great basketball.
Yeah. So what are you expecting for that matchup with Duke? I mean, like we said, 258th meeting, first time ever facing the tournament. Coach K's last, Hubert Davis's first in terms of a Final Four. They split the meetings in the regular season. I mean, just so much going on with this matchup. What are you expecting for it?
Yeah, double-digit wins for each team on the other's home court.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about that, right? So, the big thing, the first meeting was Armando Bacot, Carolina's all-ACC center. Hubert Davis decided to have him guard Paulo Banchero man-to-man at the start of the game. Paulo's a much more, active player. Bacot got 2 fouls. He's out of the game. Duke builds up a huge lead and just runs away and wins it. So that was the mistake that game. Obviously, the game in Cameron, Hubert decided, we'll have somebody else guard Paulo and not have that happen again. And it worked out better for Carolina. Duke was playing really poor defense at the time. They 94 to 81 was the final. They gave up over 50 points in the second half on their home court, which was just a stunning development for them. So I think we talk about the zone defense, had they decided to use that in that game instead of being a little too prideful and thinking they could do it with man-to-man, maybe it's a different outcome. I think that gives Duke an advantage this time, is that they have the tool in the toolbox and they're not afraid to use it. Whereas before, I think they were too prideful to do that. So that's what I want. I want to see how the two teams, both make changes and play that chess game along the way. But Brady Manick and Caleb Love are shooting much better from the 3-point line than they did like during the regular season. Manick had some moments. Love was very rare to have games like these he's had in the tournament, and they're both shooting well. So that gives Carolina really an inside-outside with Bacot, who's a walking double-double every game. So they've got a lot of firepower, but Duke's been one of the better offensive teams all season long in KenPom and everything else you want to look at. So I expect a game, probably in the high 70s or low 80s as far as points, even though Duke's playing better defense. I mean, it's going to be that kind of game. Somebody's going to outlast somebody. They're going to have to outscore them, I think.
Yeah, I feel like you have to have a tighter game in this one than you had in either of those two first matchups, especially with being the stage and just the momentum that both these teams are on right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it'll be, and Jesse mentioned the officiating. It's not on anybody's home court this time, right? Even though both teams won on the other's home court, it's a different crew. It won't be an ACC crew that they've had, be mixed officiating groups. And so that'll make a difference too. I think that, officials like to kind of swallow their whistles a little bit, like Jesse said, let the players decide it. So I don't think like Bacot getting 2 fouls early in Chapel Hill, that's probably not something that's going to happen. They're going to let the players decide this game, and it'll be tight. I can't see it being another double. Of course, I wouldn't have thought it would be double-digit margins the first 2 times, but particularly in this one with the setup and everything and what's at stake, I think you'll just see a very tight game.
From the Kansas side of things for this game, Jesse, is there a opponent that you think Kansas should want to win this game, or just from your side of things, what do you see happening here?
Well, I mean, the way I always approach these things, again, if you're looking at it from Kansas's standpoint, is just sort of looking at the best teams over the course of the season. What have we seen from these teams, and how is it going to look from a Vegas spread perspective if one team wins or the other? And I think it's pretty clear here that if you're looking at it from a Vegas spread, and I talk about Kansas having the margin of error potentially to play a little bit poorly or play a little bit tight and still be able to recover from it, they could do that much easier against North Carolina than Duke. I mean, that's probably what's the spread in that one for North Carolina Duke? Somewhere around 3 or 4 points. I think
it's
somewhere.
around 4.
Yeah, around 4 right now. Yeah.
I mean, so I mean, that's your KU would be starting with a 2 layup advantage compared to facing Duke, basically, if you're looking at it in that sort of way. So, yeah, I mean, obviously Kansas fans, they'll be overjoyed if they get by that first game in Villanova and are able to make it. And it's funny because, us doing our jobs this way, it's just so different because I like to go through the numbers. I like to tell people what to look for in this regard. But whenever I do that on Twitter, I immediately get the blowback from Kansas fans like, don't overlook Miami, don't overlook Villanova. And it's like, well, I'm a sports writer. I can talk about this. I don't impact the team, and my paycheck comes every 2 weeks, whether Kansas wins or loses.
Exactly.
So it's just a little bit of a different perspective here. This is not trying to jinx or reverse jinx or anything. And I'm also not on staff. So it's just sort of interesting when that happens. But to answer your question, Lila, since you asked it, and since I talk about it anyway, Kansas fans, once that game ends, they'll want to be cheering for North Carolina. They'll not want to have Steve cover the national championship game if Kansas is there. They will much rather like going through Carolina potentially to get to a national championship because their odds will be a little bit more in their favor.
So then with Kansas, Villanova, obviously some huge news for Villanova coming out with Justin Moore suffering a torn Achilles. Just so hard to see to see that with any player, and to have it be on that stage and kind of that scene as they're celebrating and huddled around him. He's the team's second leading scorer, third in rebounds, averaging 4.8 points, 4.8 rebounds, 2.3 assists. I mean, that's certainly a huge blow. I mean, how much, Jesse, do you see that impacting this matchup?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've done this in the past where I've called Vegas odds makers to say, hey, how much does this injury impact a team? And the example I always think of is Joel Embiid. I mean, we know he's like NBA superstar, potential Hall of Famer, but remember he was out for Kansas. I remember calling odds makers and saying, hey, how big of a deal is this for Kansas? Is this 5 points, 10 points? What sort of thing is it? And I remember the answer shocked me because the guy's like, about a point. I was like, about a point? Like, what are you talking about? Joel Embiid, you know what I mean? And he goes, look, Kansas, if you look at what they have in this game against Stanford, it was Stanford at the time, which they ended up losing, by the way. They have other big men. They have depth. They have other guys they can go to, and all those guys are at Kansas. You know what I mean? So if you have available options, the public probably overrates what these guys are worth. Here's the problem for Villanova, just like the problem for Creighton. That's if you have depth. That's if you have guys behind them, and Villanova doesn't. We talked about the bench and the teams in the Final Four right now not having much margin for error. Villanova's 323rd in bench minutes, and they've been playing the heck out of those guys. I mean, they basically have a 6-man rotation before Justin got hurt. And so I saw like Evan Miyakawa has a great site, evanmia.com. He just tweeted out some numbers that based off his numbers, Villanova in his rankings drops from 6th to 12th without Justin Moore in there. And again, I think that's not only telling you about what Justin Moore is, but it's telling you about, hey, who is the backup? Who is the replacement for him? And for Villanova, that's a big step down. Just like for Creighton, when Ryan Kalkbrenner went out, that was a big step down. And that's why it helped Kansas so much. And the line moved basically 2 to 3 points. So I could see this one moving 2 to 3 points. And I think based off of the advanced metrics that we see out there, Ken Palm has KU by 1. And I think the Vegas spread is KU by 4. So there's your answer. I mean, this is a big deal for him to be out of there. And again, if we're putting the little subscript on the Final Four banner about Kansas, not only do we have to squeeze Ryan Kalkbrenner in there, not being in for Creighton, but we got to squeeze Justin Moore not being in there for Villanova. But we already went through this discussion. You don't apologize if you're Kansas, but it's crazy that not only has this happened to Kansas, but it's happened to Kansas for that opposing team in the game before they played them. So the team can't even practice and start to get used to a different style. Kansas is playing them totally new when these coaches have to figure out something on the fly. So at least Villanova has a few more days rather than Creighton only having the 1 day to figure it out. But this is a big blow to Creighton and a big blow to Villanova. And that's why I think Kansas is more favored in this game than they would have been potentially a week ago.
Right. And so from what I've seen, you'll then put senior guard Caleb Daniels into the starting lineup, who, was playing kind of a more of a backup type role, was one of their, 6 guys off the bench. Maybe you see more of Brandon Slater in there. It'll be interesting to, see how they decide to use everything. But I think that's such an exciting part, like we said, of this Final Four, of these are coaches that are tacticians that know, how to do this stuff and are going to throw something exciting at you. So, I mean, I think you'd have Kansas favored in this matchup just with that and with those depth things. But I mean, I'm sure we're going to see something interesting here from Jay Wright.
Well, yeah. And real quick, it's that chess match for Bill Self too, because listen, the 2018 Final Four when KU played Villanova, what absolutely killed them? KU had a big man, and Udoka Azubuike was not comfortable outside the lane. Villanova's big men pulled him out, shot threes over him, and just ran KU out of the building. What does KU have this year that has sometimes burned them at times? They've got a big man, Dave McCormick, who's a little bit injured with his foot, who doesn't like to be pulled to the perimeter. And we saw Creighton take advantage of that. The flip side of that is what you saw at the beginning of the second half against Miami. Miami played small against Kansas. KU started dumping into Dave McCormick. Miami had no answers, and then it started to be a foul fest. And so for Kansas, when you're facing a team that basically has 5.5, 6 bodies, what do you do with David? I mean, do you play to Villanova's matchup? Or do you say, look, Villanova's got to guard Dave too. And by the way, if he draws 3 or 4 fouls, Villanova's up a creek without a paddle. You know what I mean? Like they don't have anybody they can go to that they trust. So that'll be fascinating. I mean, I think sometimes we overanalyze these matchups a little bit. And sometimes at the end of the day, you just want to get your best players on the court and let them decide the thing instead of going to your 8th or 9th or 10th best player to try to match up to a team that's not as good as you. But having said that, I mean, I watched the 2018 Final Four game where KU did not make an adjustment quick enough and Villanova went bombs away and KU was out of that game before it started. So that will be something to watch in this game because we know Jay Wright's style. We know what he likes to do. He's been doing this, before a bunch of other teams did. So which style will prevail and how much will Dave be in there and how much will KU play to him and how many fouls can he draw to put extra stress on Villanova? That's going to be a big part of this game and how much Bill Self has to adjust in there to go away from what KU normally does.
Right. And I mean, I think it's very likely, we have these games, we end up with Duke, Kansas in a championship. So I want to get your guys' thoughts on that. And I think it's a very fun narrative in itself. I mean, Coach K's first national title came in 91 against the Jayhawks. You can now have this be a matchup potentially for his last one. What do you think about that possibility, Steve?
Yeah, no, I think it'd be a lot of fun. And they play, again, a reference to Champions Classic every 3 years. They meet up in that event. So it's not like they're not familiar with each other, even though they didn't play this year. Duke played Kentucky, Kansas played Michigan State. But that would be a nice, I guess, alpha and omega to his career, right? Kansas again to wrap it up. I would look forward to that matchup. If it's Villanova, you got again the new up and coming latest best thing. Villanova winning a couple championships since Duke's last one. And so the old, as Coach K rested himself, he called himself the old man the other day. So the old man can go out, slapping the new guy maybe before he departs the scene, if that happens. Or, Jay Wright can send Coach K off into retirement with I'm the guy now, I'm the captain, right? That movie line. So either one matchup would be good, but Duke and Kansas would be a lot of fun for sure.
I think Jay Wright will appreciate you calling him the young guy, don't you think, at this point? I mean, for sure.
I mean, compared to Coach K, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, a lot of us are young guys compared to that. KU Duke 91, actually one of my first memories of watching Kansas, way back in the day, that national title game. That was great. I do want to talk about me feeling old a little bit because I did see the ESPN graphic that said that Coach K is the first coach to take a team to a Final Four in 5 different decades. So I was thinking, man, did he take one in the 60s and the 70s? And then I looked on the screen and go, oh, wait a minute. No, he did 90s, aughts, or 80s, 90s,
80s,
80s, 90s, 10s, aughts, 20s. And I'm like, oh, I've been alive all those decades. Oh, man. I was thinking it was further back, but no, it was not further back. Absolutely. And, Bill Self treats every game like the Super Bowl. I mean, he already does this. And this is, I think, part of the reason sometimes why his teams are a little tight because he is so in tune on every possession and wanting to win every possession, doing every little thing right to try to win a basketball game. But I can tell you that 2018 Final Four game, when it was KU Duke regional final, it just means a little more to him. And I cannot tell you how fired up he would be for that game. I mean, I'm just telling you, it's Kansas versus Duke. And in the media, he will absolutely say it's Kansas versus Duke and it's his players. And he's always does the right thing with deflecting. And when they win, it's always about him and his assistant coaches and the team, all that sort of stuff. I'm just telling you, there would be nothing that would fire him up more in this world than to face Coach K for a national title and to do everything possible on every possession, whether spoken or unspoken, to try to outcoach him in his final game. So again, we'll see if it happens. And I'm telling you right now, Bill Self will never give you that quote as long as he lives. But I'm just telling you from watching him on the sideline, keep that in your mind. When those games happen and he plays a blue blood, when he plays a Hall of Famer, he is turned up to an 11. And I mean, that would be so much fun for people to watch because he would be, we're on podcast, he would be coaching his ass off.
Yeah.
He would be coaching his ass off, because I know he coached his ass off in 2018 and took joy in every little thing that Kansas did to get an advantage. Every corner three they got against that zone, that Duke zone that they set up scheme wise, he was loving it. And I'm telling you, he would love every little thing they could do against Duke if that national title game happened.
And what's great about that is that Coach K is always looking for the edge, and that's how he's, put his career together, right? And had the most wins and all that stuff. So he would be doing it just as hard the other direction. And that would make the two of them would revel in that. They want the other guy to bring his best and to be doing his best thing. And the theater of that would be magical.
Yeah, I think that would certainly be a really fun matchup to have there. And I just think it's kind of crazy we're at this point. I was saying all year I didn't think that Duke would get to this point, and now they're here, have a really good shot at that national title. I mean, Kansas right there too. I mean, like I said, I think those are the two most likely teams to get to that national title. But I'll kind of end on a fun note here with a question to both of you. We have had some upsets, some really exciting games. We've not had a true buzzer beater in this tournament yet. Do you see a buzzer beater coming in one of these final games? And if so, of the players on those remaining four teams, who do you think is most likely to hit one?
So I'll start. I'd love to see it, right? Just the drama of it. And I'm going to go with Jeremy Roach. I'm not going to go with Banchero, even though he's the guy who'll have the ball in his hands probably, and somebody will try to stop him maybe. But Jeremy Roach is a guy that's come on later in the season. He wasn't a great shooter throughout the year. He was in and out of the lineup, but he's hit some huge shots for Duke in this tournament. And it just feels like it's destiny for him to make that kind of shot if it's Duke that does it.
Well, it's the easy answer over here. I mean, it's not what you would have said a month ago, but Bill Self handed his oars to Remy Martin. So if it's going to be late game, if it's going to be a shot needed, and KU remains some of those other guys as hesitant as they've been, I'm telling you what, they've been looking to Remy, and Remy's delivered at some crucial times. So it's kind of like that old saying, let go and let God. It's kind of like right now, Bill Self is like, let go and let Remy, So I think if KU has a shot down the stretch, and this would not have been the answer for about 5 months of the season, but right now I think it's let God and let Remy. So I think he would turn the ball over to him and see what happened, because he saved KU in this tournament so far, and he makes tough shots, and he could probably make another one with the game on the line. So I think if KU gets to that point, that's where they're headed.
I think we need that on a shirt. It seems like a saying that should be on a Kansas shirt.
We'll get that NIL going for Remy on that one. There you go.
Yeah, that was going to be who I was going to say too. I mean, I was kind of leaning towards Colin Gillespie just because, he's shown the ability to do that throughout his career, but I just can't see Villanova winning that game without Justin Moore. So then I think my default from there would also be Remy Martin. I feel like he's going to be a guy that's willing to let it fly, or maybe Ochai with, this being his senior year, kind of last shot at it and, going to the league regardless. I could see that happening as well. But regardless, I think we have a really exciting Final Four in store. Guys, safe travels to New Orleans, and thanks so much for coming on, and thanks to everyone at home for listening.
Thanks a lot.